used to share a border years ago, and they have techniques of swinging that kind of cross-pollinate through. And the Iranians will swear that they invented it. The Indians say that they invented it. I'm not going to argue with anybody. Whatever you say, that's fine. Well, what is interesting is that I actually listened to a podcast about Iran, and what happened in the podcast was that they were talking about Cyrus the Great. 2,500 years ago, led armies through Iran, Persia in those days. And he had a concept of having 10,000 men who he called the Immortals. The Immortals had 5,000 men as backup. So if ever a man was wounded or killed, there would be an instant replacement. And he wanted, legend says, I don't know this is a fact or not, but legend says that he wanted his armies to train with equipment that was 2 to 3 times heavier than their swords and shields. So consequently, this was very, very important, and this is how the meal training kind of came about. Now, just to paint a bit of a picture about Iran, it's in some ways very similar to West Australia here, desert everywhere. So basically in Iran, they do push-ups on what's called a shena board. So this is like a sword. So you've got the handle here, but it's mirrored on both sides. You put this on the ground and you do push-ups. Why is it a board like this? Because they used to do push-ups on their swords, because otherwise your hands would sink into the sand. Okay, and you always have to keep there's a split push-up. So you're in a split position with your legs, and your heels on your toes have to be on the ground. You go 3 times to the back, once down. So that's basically a shena push-up. Now, the reasoning behind the meal swings, you have to imagine that in the army there would be a shield on this hand, a sword here. So basically it would be that the sword would strike, the shield would move out of the way, it would strike down, the shield would come back. And the swinging that is done in Iran is based on that, but it morphed into, so it was basically down here, and it's that type of movement here with 2 clubs. Now, when you go so in India, the origins aren't as so much military as they are in Iran. But basically, I haven't found any sort of history, sort of military history in India to back that sort of thinking up. But the clubs in India, in some cases, the really big clubs are much, much bigger than the Iranian ones, and the movement's very, very similar. What the Iranians do is they lift the clubs off their shoulders, and there's no upper body contact with the clubs. Whereas in India, because the clubs are so huge, they slide them on and off their shoulders. And they put mustard oil on their shoulders so that the skin doesn't break. It's a very different technique. Very interesting. I mean, if whoever's listening goes onto my YouTube channel, you'll see some of this stuff, because I've been there, filmed it, and recorded it and published it, basically.